What's up, everybody? Great to see you here on a Friday afternoon. And boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to cover. This is The Slate. I'm Adam Kaufman. He is Matt LaMarca. We have been blown off once again by Steve Buchanan, who evidently is just way too busy now that baseball's back. And you would think he'd want to join us to talk a little baseball, wouldn't you, LaMarca?
I mean, listen, there's a reason we call him Hollywood, right? He's all big time now. Forgot where he came from.
It's unbelievable.
It's maybe we'll catch him again on MLB Network, but that's probably the only way we'll see Steve these days.
Yeah. It's you have to have an intervention for Bukes. Remind him just how big his head should be.
He knows it's a big dome.
Need to fit through some doorways still. No, we love Bukes, obviously, and I'm sure he'll join us again next week because we do have baseball futures now that we know we're going to have a full 162-game season beginning on April 7th, some rule changes, things like that. We'll get to that, LaMarca, a little bit later on in the show. We've also got, obviously, a robust 10-game slate in the association tonight on the hardwood after just a little two-gamer and a couple of, I don't know, not as compelling as I wanted them to be games that took place last night.
Still an interesting, fun slate, though, in my opinion.
It was, but I think it was more fun sort of on paper than the reality of it. At least the first game. The first game was a blowout. It was, ugly, that Sixers-Nets game, and it was the Ben Simmons boo fest, basically. The night game was more entertaining before the Nuggets just ran out of gas.
But I will still say that I liked what I saw in that first game, just because you can tell these two teams hate each other.
Love it.
Right? You had Kevin Durant and Joel Embiid jawing at each other. The refs let it happen. They didn't throw out the technical fouls, which you love to see. And now we just have to really hope that we get that series in the playoffs. I think that the stage has been set, is what I'm trying to say, Mr. Kaufman. There's bad blood.
Yeah.
And they're set up for a fun potential playoff series.
Yeah, I was just going to say they hate each other. Me with my Celtics bias, I hate both of them. So it's just it's really quite a thing. But we'll do NBA in a little bit as well. Where I want to begin, LaMarca, is with our most recent news, which comes from the world of the NFL. I was with Reed T. Fowler yesterday on the show, and we spent so much time talking about Aaron Rodgers staying put. Obviously, Russell Wilson being dealt from Seattle to Denver, Carson Wentz going from Indianapolis to Washington, and what other potential moves could happen, especially as it relates to quarterbacks. Well, this coming down in just the last, I don't even know, 15, 20 minutes here. We take a look. Deshaun Watson, of course, of Houston Texan fame, will not face criminal charges in the long, more than a year-long investigation into his situation there with a whole bunch of women, obviously, coming in his direction for, let's just call it improper behavior. To read from some of Adam Schefter's tweets, this is why Deshaun Watson, from the beginning, welcomed the police investigation. He felt he knew the truth would come out, and today a grand jury did not charge him with any of the criminal complaints. Trade market for Deshaun Watson now is expected to ramp up quickly. Houston will be open to moving him, and multiple teams are expected to be interested per league sources. Field Yates also tweeting out Deshaun Watson's contract for a team that would be interested in acquiring him for 2022, a $35 million salary and cap hit, and then it drops down to 20, then to 32, then to 32. He is signed through 2025. So that's where I want to start here, obviously, and we do have some odds. We'll show you some on the DraftKings Sportsbook in terms of potential landing spots for him. What do you think? What is your estimation in terms of how this thing all ultimately plays out, and how quickly does it play out?
I think that hopefully it should play out quickly. I mean, these teams have been kind of flirting with each other for, the better part of a year now, more than a year even. At least when you look at a team like the Dolphins, right? They have been linked to Watson numerous times over the past calendar year. So the price is pretty much known at this point. It's going to cost multiple first round picks and or young players. And it now just becomes sort of a race to see who wants to try and bring him into their franchise. And I do think that there should be significant interest. Outside of the Dolphins, you now look at the Colts, right? They're a team that has a need at quarterback. Just freed up a bunch of cap space by getting rid of Carson Wentz. The Panthers are a team that have, historically been interested in Deshaun Watson. Maybe they get in on the mix. And then, is there a sleeper team out there? Maybe somebody like the New York Giants, who are kind of in a transitional period, right? They're not necessarily looking to get a new quarterback at this point, but they also know that Daniel Jones isn't really the guy. So it'll be interesting to see how how aggressive teams like that are willing to get. Ultimately, I would still put the Dolphins as the favorites in the clubhouse, just because, again, I think they're a ready to win team that has been linked to him in the past. So yeah, it's obviously, this is a great piece of news for Deshaun Watson. It should expedite this whole trade situation.
So some of the odds on the DraftKings Sportsbook here, and we don't have it. I'm sure it's coming eventually, but unless I'm mistaken, we don't currently have a listing for, odds for Deshaun Watson's next team. But where he does fall in, obviously, are looking at some of the various odds for who will take the first snap in 2022 or 2023, that regular season for, X team. And obviously Deshaun Watson is listed at plus 1,200 for the Colts, which is way down the board behind the likes of Jimmy Garoppolo, who's the favorite, Teddy Bridgewater, who could very well be on the move there from Denver, Marcus Mariota, who somehow, some way remains with Las Vegas. Then you have Deshaun Watson, who is, again, distant on the odds board for the New Orleans Saints. Jameis Winston is actually the favorite to return to New Orleans, which would be interesting. And Taysom Hill listed right there as well. And then Pittsburgh, Deshaun Watson is third on the list right there behind. I like this. You ready? Mason Rudolph plus 275. Any rookie quarterback plus 350. Then Deshaun Watson at plus 700. We also have Watson listed in Seattle. Any rookie QB is the favorite there. Mystery rookie QB at minus 110. Then Drew Lock at plus 125, who, of course, went the other way in that deal. Deshaun Watson listed for Tampa Bay, third behind Kyle Trask and Jimmy Garoppolo. No surprise there. Garoppolo has been linked to Tampa Bay. So those are just some of the teams that we have listed. And noticeably Miami, who, was the first one that you mentioned, obviously, after all the reports that we've heard over the last several months. Miami's not even on the board right here in terms of the potential for Deshaun Watson at this moment. So what do you think of just these that are listed here? Again, Tampa, Seattle, Pittsburgh, New Orleans, and Indianapolis in terms of a potential fit for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, obviously all teams that kind of need a quarterback. For me, the Colts seem like the longest shot, just because they have not shown a willingness to kind of go all in on quarterbacks over the past few years, right? They brought in Phillip Rivers kind of as a stopgap option. They brought in Carson Wentz as a stopgap option, but there have been other quarterbacks on the market over that time frame. Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson, and the Colts seemingly have not been willing to get involved in those markets. So I think the odds of them making a big splash move like that remain kind of slim. I would put my money on Jimmy Garoppolo, somebody like of that ilk, taking the first snap for the Colts next year. Some of these other odds are interesting. The Saints have the two quarterbacks, but there's that old saying, if you have two quarterbacks, you really have no quarterbacks. And certainly both guys have some questions there. I do think Pittsburgh's the most interesting fit for Watson. When you look at the abundance of weapons that they have, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster. Although I think Juju's a free agent, so he might not be back, but still, with no Ben Roethlisberger and with only Mason Rudolph there, they are a team that really needs to make a move. I know that they've kind of been hyping up Mason Rudolph. We've seen him play football. It's not good. I understand they were a playoff team with Ben Roethlisberger playing terribly last year, but that doesn't mean that you should just treat the quarterback position like it's, not that important. We know it is. So if they have a chance to get a player of Deshaun Watson's caliber, I think they should absolutely explore it.
Do you think there's any, I don't want to call it buyer's remorse, obviously, because we're still talking about a great QB and a future Hall of Famer, but a guy who is at least on the back nine, wherever you want to put him there. And I'm talking about Russell Wilson. Do you think any part of the Broncos wishes they had let this play out a little bit? Would they rather have a Deshaun Watson than a Russell Wilson?
I mean, maybe, but I don't think they have any regrets about pulling the trigger when they did. Again, quarterback's the most important position in football, and Denver is a team that treats it as such, right? They have been very aggressive. They went after Peyton Manning. They now have Russell Wilson. So, again, there's some question marks with Wilson. Didn't look like nearly the same player after coming back to the lineup last year following an injury. So, yeah, maybe they would rather have the younger guy, but I still think they feel a whole lot better about the position today than they did last week. And that's really all that matters.
Is it a foregone conclusion that Deshaun Watson is leaving Houston in some form and that someone else will be that team's quarterback?
I'm going to say yes.
Who do you think it'll be? Someone who's already there, like, the rookie, obviously, they just took in the draft last year, or do you think they go out and acquire somebody?
I think Davis Mills played well enough that he's going to get another crack next year. He was terrible when he first started playing, but he really showed some signs of improvement down the stretch. He was the top high school recruit at quarterback in the country, so he has a bit of a pedigree. I think that they're going to give him a crack, especially since they are not one of these teams that, can look in the mirror and say, oh, we're just a quarterback away, right? Mm-hmm. They are in the midst of a full rebuild. So it makes sense to try and see if the rookie young player that you have on your roster can play.
Let's go over to the NBA in the interest of time and hitting a whole bunch of different things here on this Friday show. And we appreciate any questions, any thoughts, any whatever that you have, throw them at us, whether you're watching on YouTube, Twitch, or Twitter. We'll do our best to help you set lineups or place your bets or whatever sort of tutelage or advice that we can provide you here in the next, half hour that we're with you before the Madden Sims take over again. So again, 10-game situation here, 10-game slate in the NBA, and you have got a lot of offense expected in this first game of the night between Minnesota and Orlando. The over-under is sitting at 233. You also have 229 for your Knicks and the Grizzlies. You got 229 for the Jazz and Spurs, 229 for the Wizards and Lakers. So, and that's just obviously looking purely at point totals. So from without getting guys specific, because we'll get there, from a DFS standpoint, are those games ones that you would tend to target just because you're expecting a lot of offense there?
You always want to lean on games with a higher total than games with a lower total. It's not the end all be all factor, but certainly I think like if you're going to use that as a starting point, start with the games that are expected for the most points.
Sure. But, and maybe I didn't frame the question the right way because I realize there's a common sense element to that. I guess I just mean is there one in particular of those handful that you would zero in on, first and foremost?
Yeah, I would say the first game you mentioned, the Timberwolves and the Magic. If you look at the last 10 games, the Timberwolves rank first in pace. The Magic ranks second in pace over that time frame. Think that's a pretty good formula for this game being played at a fast pace, which means there should be plenty of points scored. The only real question is, can the Magic keep this game competitive? The Timberwolves have been just blowing the absolute doors off of people recently. Granted, they've played a very easy schedule over that time frame, but you know what? The Magic aren't much of a step up in competition, so I think it's very realistic that the Timberwolves win this game going away. On my NBA cheat sheet article, I had the Pistons, the Timberwolves -7.5 as my favorite bet. They're now up to 8. Still think that's a good number. Fading teams like the Magic, who are incentivized to lose games down the stretch, is historically been a very good idea. I have some numbers to back it up. I won't bore you with them, but when you've got a team like the Magic that is literally they're the best thing for their team at the moment is to lose games. So they're going to lose games. Like it's pretty much sometimes it's that easy.
There are only a couple of there are certainly some larger spreads tonight. I mean, looking at this, there's only one that's within 4 points. Everything else is larger. You got double figures between Mavericks and Rockets. That's Dallas 11-point favorites on the road against, as we know, a bad Houston team. The biggest spread of the night, which I don't know that it surprises me that it's the biggest, but the number does surprise me a little bit. Detroit and Boston. It's a 14-point spread, and I realize Like Detroit is bad. I mean, bad, a terrible road team, a terrible team, but it is playing better of late. And I know it's not at full strength. Like Diallo's out and Stewart's out and Hayes is out. Like they are certainly missing some members of their rotation. You have a Celtics team on the other side that's as hot as they come. You know, winners of 15 of 17, 22 of 26, or 28 rather. Basically the hottest team in the NBA next to only the Suns, who have one win better in the last couple of months. But these teams have matched up 3 times, LaMarca, over the last, I don't know, sometime during this run, over the last month. And Detroit has given Boston a tough time. Like had the upset right before the All-Star break, a couple of, narrow games around that as well. So 14 just, it feels large.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. When I was looking at this slate, that number really jumped off the page to me, 14 points. Because like you said, the Pistons have been frisky of late, right? They've won 5 of their last 7 games, 7 of their last 10. And their losses over that time frame, 9 points to the Celtics, 3 points on the road to the Wizards, and 6 points to the Bulls. So they have been playing significantly better basketball of late. My initial reaction was this is too many points, but then you look at some of the betting numbers here, and the Pistons right now are a very public underdog. They're getting 71% of the bets and 67% of the dollars. And I am always wary of siding with public underdogs. Typically that's a trap spot. So I still think I will take the Pistons, but I'm not going to be surprised when the Celtics win this game by 27 points.
Do you have a favorite bet on the board tonight as it relates to, whether it's just going with a money line, there's a team that you really like, or if you're looking at spread or point totals, obviously?
Yeah, I'm still, siding with the Timberwolves. I mentioned that was my best bet in my article. I still think they're my favorite. And I'm also just going to continue to fade the Lakers because it hasn't not worked yet, right? Like it's pretty much been automatic all season. You can get the Wizards getting 4.5 points. The Wizards are getting 82% of the dollars right now on just 59% of the bets. I don't see any reason why this would be the spot where the Lakers put things together, right? Like they just lost to the Rockets. I have no problem taking the Wizards with Kristaps Porzingis back in the lineup. That should be a positive for them in the long term. So, give me the Wiz plus 4.5.
If we're sort of, transitioning a little bit to DFS in this conversation as well, and there's some, injuries to watch out for still in terms of game time decisions. Minnesota, there's a bunch, Anthony Edwards, Jared Vanderbilt, Jordan McLaughlin. For Miami, there's Jimmy Butler, Christian Wood, Jayshawn Tate for Houston, Dylan Brooks for Memphis, Obi Toppin, your guy for New York, Jalen McDaniels, Charlotte.
Not my guy.
No, he's your guy. All right. Doug McDermott for San Antonio. So not huge names, but there are certainly some potentially impactful ones. Looking at this Dallas game though, there's no Jalen Brunson, there's no Dorian Finney-Smith, there's no Tim Hardaway. On top of that, you have Dallas favored by 11, like I mentioned, a team that's won 7 of 10. Just speaks largely to how bad Houston is, especially considering this game is in Houston. But is this setting up to be an uber chalky, huge, you can't even, allow yourself to fade him kind of night for Luka Doncic?
I wouldn't say that there's no chance that I'll fade him. I think Luka at 12K is a good play, but he's still 12K, right? And he's averaged 1.65 DraftKings points per minute over the past month. He should definitely benefit from the absence of Brunson, and it's a great matchup. But I think with the blowout concerns, he is not a slam dunk lock for me, especially when I think LeBron James is just as good of a play at 11,800. He's slightly cheaper. He's been excellent with Anthony Davis out of the lineup. And the Lakers are just so desperate right now that they have to push LeBron hard. He played over 45 minutes in an overtime loss in their last game. He played 38.5 minutes the game before. He's got back-to-back games with at least 71 DraftKings points.
Yeah.
So This game versus the Wizards, it's another good matchup for the Lakers. Even though I'm picking the Wizards to cover, I think that this should be a high scoring, close game with plenty of fantasy value on both sides. And I'm expecting LeBron to deliver another, 60 plus 70 even DraftKings points.
It's just crazy. Like looking at this last game, coincidentally enough, against the Rockets in Houston, but he shot so poorly, overall from 3, 1 for 9. He missed a couple free throws, which is not in character, obviously, but that triple double, a robust, even a 23-point triple double. And, mixing a few blocks, like you said, turns into 70 plus fantasy points. It's wild. You don't look at that stat line before, like doing the math, obviously. You don't just eyeball that stat line and think huge fantasy night.
Yeah, we've really gotten spoiled over the past few years between, what Russ was doing during his prime and what Jokic is doing now. It's almost like triple doubles have kind of lost their specialness, right? And I get it. It's arbitrary thresholds, right? Who really cares if a guy goes for 10, 10, and 10? But, it does kind of, you take a game like what LeBron just has, and it's like, yeah, all right, pretty good game, but in reality, that's a monster performance.
So the chalk of the chalk, if you will, at least in terms of, sitting about an hour and a half from lock as we are right now, and the projections where they are, you can't help but look at this New Orleans game. The Pelicans, they've lost their last 3. They're facing, obviously, the Hornets. Games in New Orleans. Brandon Ingram, no. CJ McCollum, no. Obviously, Zion is still out. So Devontae Graham is projected to be owned in more than half of lineups. Right now, sitting around 54%, projected for right around 31 fantasy points. There are a bunch of certainly very justifiable plays that are in this game, whether you're talking about Jonas Valanciunas or Herbert Jones, the list goes on, Najee Marshall, you could Jose Alvarado, there are a bunch, but Devontae Graham, how do you feel about that ownership projection?
I mean, Devontae Graham is the best play in that game at 4,300. He's increased his usage rate over 5% with McCollum and Ingram off the court since McCollum joined the team following, the trade. He's averaging just under 1 DraftKings point per minute in that situation. So you figure he gets, probably a few additional minutes tonight. He can get up to, over 30. And then you factor in a 1 point, fantasy point per minute type of output. It's hard to not like him at 4,300. However, when we're talking about 50+% ownership type guys, I don't know if I feel comfortable using Graham as that kind of play. Typically we see that type of ownership reserved for, when you have a min-priced player who's expected to see 30 plus minutes. I don't necessarily know if Graham fits that bill for me. So if you wanted to pivot to an Alvarado or a Najee Marshall, something like that, totally acceptable in my opinion. And also don't forget about Jonas Valanciunas.
Yep.
Right. Jonas is one of the best per minute centers in the league. And he also figures to get a boost in usage with their absences. So, it wouldn't shock me if it's a night where Devontae Graham finishes between 25 and 30 fantasy points. And the winning lineup doesn't have him. I think that's a very realistic outcome that I'm okay with playing for when he's projected for 50+% ownership.
To throw out some of the great values for you tonight, LaMarca, as they sit right now, barring other guys obviously getting ruled out closer to lock or even after lock for later games. Rudy Gobert, Alperen Şengün, Spencer Dinwiddie, Graham, obviously we talked about, PJ Washington, Jordan Clarkson, Nick Batum, Maxi Kleber in that Dallas game, if people were looking away from Luka at all, Reggie Bullock, Lonnie Walker, Josh Green is in a great spot, obviously, for Dallas tonight. There's Jose Alvarado, who we were just talking about, Marshall as well. House you could include for Utah. So that's a bunch. But who are some of your favorites?
She's a brick. House.
Like it.
I'm gonna say Şengün is my favorite.
Go ahead.
At 6,200. Şengün is already an excellent fantasy center on a per minute basis. He's averaged 1.13 DraftKings points per minute this season, and he's increased that mark to 1.2 DraftKings points per minute over the past month. The guy is super talented. The only reason that we aren't talking about him more is because he's buried behind Christian Wood on the depth chart. So the last 2 games without Wood, that first performance, a little bit on the low side in a tough matchup versus the Heat, but then in a good matchup against the Lakers, he absolutely feasted. 50 DraftKings points. The price has come way up to 6,200, but I still think if you factor in, 30 plus minutes at 1.2 DraftKings points per minute, 6,200 seems like a really nice price tag.
Just looking at some of what we have in store again, 10 gamer tonight. What do you think the key is in terms of building out a lineup with this 10 gamer for, for people that maybe haven't been getting after it all week? Again, you had the 2 games last night. Now you're looking to sink your teeth in a little bit. Like, I'm looking at some of the different, optimal type builds. It's not stars and scrubs. I mean, Luka's certainly a guy that a lot of people are going to have, but aside from Luka, sort of feels like you got a Luka, you got a value guy, and then you got a whole lot of balance in between and mid-range guys. Is that how you would look to build out a lineup based on what you're seeing with this slate?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen stars and scrubs kind of be the default build all year, but I don't know if we necessarily have the value tonight to support that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have the Pelicans, but you can't lean on the Pelicans for like 4 pieces, in my opinion. You
Sure.
want to balance yourself out a bit more than that. And I do think that some of these, sort of mid-range type stars are intriguing to me. You mentioned Rudy Gobert. He's super cheap, compared to how he's usually priced at 7,400. Valanciunas is 7,800. And then Donovan Mitchell at 8,600, I think, is my favorite tournament play on the slate. The Jazz are another team with a really strong matchup today. They're taking on the Spurs. No Bojan Bogdanovic for the Jazz. And you may not think that that's like a big deal on the surface, but Bogdanovic ranks 3rd on the team in usage this season. And Mitchell has seen a pretty sizable usage bump with Bogdanovic off the floor. He ups his fantasy production to about 1.4 DraftKings points per minute. So I think coming off of a blowout win where he wasn't really needed, this is a really nice spot to kind of buy low on him, and likely get him at, pretty moderate ownership.
Any other parting thoughts on the NBA before we make our way to baseball for a little bit?
This is a borderline must-win game for the Lakers. Borderline must-win game. They have arguably the hardest remaining schedule in the league. Only 6 of their final 18 games are at home, including this one tonight. They have to win this game. They have to. And I still don't think they're going to. It's crazy. It really, the amount of pressure that has been put on LeBron James's shoulders every single night. And the fact that, he's still delivering, but the team is just that bad, like,
a team that he played a large role in helping to construct as well.
LeBron is having as good of a year as he's really ever had. I mean, there's maybe a little bit of slippage from an efficiency standpoint from, his peak Miami days, but he's going to be a first team all NBA player, and this team can't win games. It's really mind boggling.
Do you see them falling all the way out of the play-in tournament? Right now they're sitting 9th in the West. They're, well out. Like, the top 6 is obviously there's no chance. They're sitting 11 games back of that, but they're only 3 games away from not. In fact, 2 games away from not even being in that top 10 mix right now.
So I don't think that they fall out of it entirely just because the bottom of the West is that bad. Right? Like, I could see the Pelicans passing the Lakers, but that would still only get them to 10th place. Yep. Right? Then you would need a team like the Blazers or the Spurs or the Kings to go on a pretty major run down the stretch to leap them. And I just don't see that happening. So I think the Lakers get into the play-in tournament, but they're going to be the 9 seed or the 10 seed. And that means they're going to have to win 2 straight games to get into the playoffs, at least one of which is going to be a road game. So it's a very uphill battle that they're facing. And you can get them to miss the playoffs at, around minus 300, 350, something like that.
I like that.
I think that number is too generous to the Lakers. I think it should be closer to, maybe even almost minus 500 at this point.
Outrageous. All right. Let's do a little baseball here in the 10-12 minutes, we've got left. We can do some other stuff as well. Like I said, if anybody has any questions, we can circle back on some other things. But we know that we have a Major League Baseball season coming.
Yeah, baby.
Let's go. You're sitting there celebrating with your Mets hat on. We've got players getting ready to report to spring training, be it in Florida or Arizona in the coming days. Games are going to begin. I think it's mid next week, Wednesday, Thursday, something like that. And then obviously opening day after a shortened spring training is April 7th. So all this talk of 4 series being canceled to begin the year, it's all going to be made up. You're going to have a full 162. There are going to be double headers. The season's only being extended by 3 days. It's only starting a week later than originally planned. So not a lot outside of just obviously off-season, months-long, 99-day frustration from a lockout of billionaires and millionaires arguing. Beyond that, life as we know it is getting ready to resume in the world of Major League Baseball. But there are some rule changes, Lamarca. There are some things that are going to be a little bit different here. You've got an expanded 12-team playoff format, sort of follows, kind of the not current, but just prior, more recent NFL playoff format, where you're going to have a couple of teams get a bye. There's the one and done is gone, which I like, by the way. I hated a 1-game play-in after a 162 game regular season in baseball. I just always thought that was incredibly stupid. You're going to have a universal DH. Those are some of the larger things that are happening in 2022. And then of course, 2023 is what everybody's waiting for. The pitch clock, banning shifts, larger bases, if anyone thinks that's going to achieve anything. So what do you think of all that has happened and what is to come over the course of this next 5-year labor deal?
Well, I'm going to leave the 2023 stuff till 2023.
Okay.
That's future Kaufman and Lamarca's problem.
Look forward to it.
I think that the universal DH is a change that needed to happen. The fact that, there are 2 separate leagues that play by separate rules always seemed very odd to me when we have interleague play. It would be like if teams in the Western Conference of the NBA were allowed to use 6 guys on the court. It's just weird. It's weird that there were different rules.
Sure.
I've always considered myself an NL baseball truther. I like the strategy of it. But when we had that universal DH for the strike season or the COVID season, I was like, yeah, this is just better. It's just a better game. Who doesn't want to see a real hitter at the plate instead of a pitcher, unless that pitcher is Jacob deGrom or Shohei Ohtani, aka pitchers who rake. Yeah. I think from a betting perspective, the biggest impacts that I can think of, maybe it has a slight impact on NL totals. Maybe NL totals, they deserve to be a smidge higher this year than they have in the past, just given the additional batter in the lineup. And it'll probably take some time for NL teams to truly embrace that. I don't think that the NL teams right now, a lot of them don't have, a DH, quote unquote, right? Like the Red Sox for all those years had David Ortiz. The Yankees have like 17 DHs on their roster. The NL teams, you can't really carry those guys until now. So, the team that I really think benefits the most might be my New York Metropolitans, because they kind of have an abundance of batters. Like Pete Alonso seems like he was made to be a designated hitter. And they also have an owner who is just willing to throw the bucks around. So they can bring in a DH right now if they want to.
Well, I think a lot of teams should be. It really, if you're a player, like if you're a JD Martinez type, if you're a guy who just really has no business being in the field and you're like an Eddie Murray, right? Like you're getting a little bit up there in age. You don't play the field anymore, but you still can hit. You still want to hang on a little bit longer. I mean, you've doubled your potential market. Like before, you could only look at the American League before and hope that there was a team in need of a DH that would offer you a decent contract. I mean, now you have doubled the landscape. You have opened up a world of financial options for yourself. If you're and pitchers, for the most part, I realized, like, you always heard the random interview with a pitcher who's like, yeah, that was a lot of fun. I love doing that. But for the most part, pitchers don't like to hit. It disrupts the routine. They don't want anything to do with running on the base pads, with looking at all the pitcher injuries that have happened that have nothing to do with pitching. They don't want any of that nonsense to sidetrack them from what they need to do, unless it's like that random time they come to the plate and rope an RBI double, and then they think it's the greatest moment they've had since college or high school. So this is, I agree with you. Like I like the strategy of what is now, I guess, the old National League Baseball very, very much. I'm a big fan of it, even being an American League guy. I always really enjoyed National League Baseball. But just in terms of the consistency, like, this had to happen. This is something that had to happen for Major League Baseball. And I think ultimately it will be a good thing, probably right away.
Another potential consequence in the betting market is, I think you can maybe see a downtick in strikeouts from some NL pitchers, right? You look at guys who are in the National League, they were basically getting I don't want to say a free strikeout, but certainly they had a greater chance of striking out the number 9 hitter than their American League counterparts did. Mm-hmm. So if you are an NL pitcher who is striking out 9 batters per 9 innings, maybe now you're down to 8 batters per 9 innings with the removal of the pitcher spot. So I think that could be an interesting, wrinkle to maybe attack early in the season while these lines are kind of getting updated. NL pitcher strikeout unders.
Looking at team futures right now, the Dodgers are the favorites to win the World Series, plus 700. The Yankees right behind them, as are the Astros, plus 900. Your Mets, plus 1,000. Top 5. Blue Jays, top 1,100. When you're looking at this and thinking about, okay, like, personally, I don't like the 12-team expanded format. I like that it's not a one and done anymore. I hated that. But I just, one thing that I always liked about baseball was it was just more exclusive. You know what I mean? Like you had 10, even when they added the second wild card, you had 10 teams making the playoffs. It was still a third of all the teams in baseball. It wasn't half your league making the playoffs the way it is in the NBA and the NHL and in football as well, obviously. And that's the direction we're trending. Like 12 is going to become 14. I don't love that.
I really enjoyed the playoff system, the way that they had it set up. I was a big fan of the 1 game wild card playoff because I think it really incentivized winning your division, right?
Definitely
which has always mattered in baseball. And it gave us, a historic race last season between the Giants and the Dodgers, who won 107 and 106 games.
Yep.
If both of those teams get guaranteed playoff spots, there's really no reason to try and win the division outside of home field advantage, which does still matter, but to a far, far lesser extent. So I really enjoyed that. And to me, anytime you're adding in more playoff teams, you're just watering down your regular season. And baseball's regular season is already kind of watered down to begin with, at 162 games. So to me, if you're going to play 162 games, you better allow the best teams into the playoffs. Yeah. It shouldn't just be like, all right, well, you had one stretch where you were 10 games over 500. You're good enough to get in the playoffs now. Selfishly, as a Mets fan, I kind of like it because maybe my team will actually go to the postseason for a change. But I really top 4
World Series favorite on the sports book here, buddy.
I know. Listen, they were similarly priced last year, Mr. Kaufman. I don't know if you can recall all the way back to last season, but the Mets were among the favorites in the National League, behind only the Dodgers and the Padres, I want to say. This leaderboard is kind of interesting, right? I think the Dodgers, I've been a big Dodgers believer for the past half decade, because you just look at that team on paper and they just have so much more talent than everybody else. I'm not sure I necessarily feel that way this season, right? There is a report that they're close to re-signing Clayton Kershaw. As much as I love him, and Bukes knows me, and Bukes have an inside joke about how I have a poster of Clayton Kershaw and he hates him for some reason. But as big as that is, he's not the same guy he was in his prime. Who knows what's happening with Trevor Bauer? They've lost Corey Seager, right? It doesn't seem like the same team to me that it did last year. So I don't necessarily feel like backing them as the favorites is the direction that I want to go in.
How do you, never mind World Series favorite, obviously, because that's sort of something different you need to consider. But if you're looking at, and I could pull up, let's see. Well, I don't want to look at regular season leaders, team futures, regular season wins. Let's look at that. If you're, whatever, random team, if you're looking at the Mets, if you're looking at anybody, how are you handicapping this thing right now, with free agency just underway? Like, teams obviously should normally be in spring training by now, and you'd have a whole bunch of games already done. Now, spring, like in theory, because we've been waiting for almost 24 hours and basically nothing has happened. But in theory, free agency is going to ramp up. Things are going to go crazy. You're going to have some big names changing homes. Like you said, Clayton Kershaw, Carlos Correa, like you name it. You're going to have guys that are signing all over the place. If you're attacking this thing right now, how are you going about doing that? Or are you just sitting? You just sitting on your hands until basically, at least partway through spring training, on the verge of opening day before you have any sense of what this is going to look like?
I mean, you certainly don't have to bet anything early if you don't want to, right? These numbers are not going anywhere. They
Right.
might move, but
Right.
I think if you want to play sort of the news following game, right? Like, everything that you see says that Freddie Freeman is probably leaving the Braves at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted to preemptively take the Braves under on 89.5, I could get behind that, because if Freddie Freeman does sign elsewhere, this number might go down. So that's kind of how I would play it. If you're looking to get some wagers in now, try and stay on top of the news reports and use that to your advantage.
Last thing, completely unrelated, and we're going to go. I don't know if you saw the news come out just prior to our show. Joe Buck leaving Fox for ESPN to re-team with Troy Aikman in the Monday Night Football booth. What do you think?
I think they should have signed Glash, personally.
He's too busy. He's got too many jobs now.
I think if the NFL came a call and Glash would have found some time for that.
Maybe he can go to Fox and do the World Series now, because there's an opening for that. Joe Buck's been doing the World Series for the last 25 years. Who's going to do that now?
It really doesn't matter. I don't know if there is a good baseball announcer anymore outside of Gary Cohen, the greatest baseball play-by-play man in the league.
Naturally. Yeah, that's look, off-season movement, even for announcers, I suppose. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here with us. T Pike, Undercover Boss Tom, our technical director. Eamon, as always, the exclusive producer of the Slate. I'm not sure anybody else has produced this show in months. It's all about Eamon, folks, and he continues to dominate. We appreciate him and all of you for being here with us throughout the week. The Slate, it comes your way after the 4 o'clock Madden Sim, right around 5:15 each and every day, Monday through Friday. So make sure you check us out again Monday. The Sweat will be happening mornings, 11 a.m. Eastern, on the DraftKings various channels, and that will resume on Monday. We have a March Madness Selection Sunday show coming up between, I believe, 6 and 8 on Sunday night, so make sure you watch that as well. He is Matt LaMarca, I'm Adam Kaufman, and somewhere lurking in the shadows is Steve Buchanan as well. Matty, see you, buddy.
Bye.